All right. So my talk, I cornily decided to title "The Corn Maze." Corn actually is a word that originally just meant any kind of grain. So specifically, the corn maize, scientific name Zea maíz. The wild ancestor of corn actually is called teosinte. It looks like this. It's sort of a small ear of grass kernels, grass seeds, with a very thick kind of plasticky husk. It was domesticated in southern Mexico about 9,000 years ago in probably a little valley in Guerrero. And you can see on the left up here the teosinte and then the kind of evolution of corn as we know it today. After that initial domestication event, scientists think that it kind of spread and became further domesticated in different places, and there's highland and lowland, and humid climate versus dry climate. There's all kinds of kind of adaptations of corn. But the center of diversity of this plant is still in Mexico. So you can see the different varieties or different land races, they're called, of corn, and then kind of the deeper red color is sort of where there's most variation or genetic variability. After the arrival of Europeans actually initially had their doubts about this strange grain. They thought if they ate it, they might turn into Aztecs. They documented also the cultural practices of the Aztecs, and eventually introduced it into Europe, where there was sort of further domestication and adaptation that happened. One of the things that's really important about corn, in terms of how it's traditionally processed, is the Aztecs and previous kind of domesticators of corn in the Americas did this process called nixtamalización. Nixtamal means like wood ash and corn. So they would take an alkaline solution, now we use calcium hydroxide, boil the corn with that to help remove that like plasticky husk that gets stuck between your teeth when you eat popcorn, and also it coincidentally happens to also make a lot of nutrients available from that corn, especially niacin. Very important because in future kind of ecosystems and populations that became more reliant on corn for nutrients, such as in the American South, they didn't know about nixtamalización. They didn't know why it was important, and it caused deficiencies. Today we're probably most familiar with corn, aka sweet corn. It's actually a mutant. It's not really corn at all, in my opinion. It has this sugary allele that makes it sweet instead of starchy. There's actually 6 main kinds of corn though. So there's also flint corn, which is called flint corn because it's very hard, typically used to make flour. Dent corn has these tiny dents in each kernel. This is my favorite corn variety, guys. Pod corn is sort of this wild type, like shaggy looking type of corn pod. This is popcorn, so it has a specific moisture content that allows it to pop and make the like lovely little cloudy looking. And then flour corn as well. There's a very special kind of corn that's grown today in southern Mexico that has this bacterial slime on it. And some scientists in the 1970s noticed this and went, oh, that's kind of weird. We've never really seen that before. Well, it actually turns out to be nitrogen fixing. So why that's important is nitrogen's in the air that we breathe, it's all around us, but it's pretty inert. It's hard for plants to take that in, or impossible for plants to take that in directly. And use it for their metabolic processes. So nitrogen-fixing bacteria help to do that. In the field, what that means is, now beans and peas and things, pulses can do that with their own nitrogen-fixing bacteria. Corn typically doesn't. But in the field, you can see these giant corn plants in relatively poor soil. This is in a place called Totontepec in southern Mexico. And there's a lot of questions today about, now that we discovered this corn variety, who's going to benefit from this? Who owns this sort of genetic diversity? One of the main institutions that's actually helped to scientificalize this corn, this oloton corn it's called, is UC Davis, also University of Wisconsin, and the Mars Company. And it kind of brings to mind, I think, a lot of like sort of biopiracy, bioprospecting issues and colonial legacies, so different kinds of plants that we've sort of used indigenous knowledge to make that more commercial. There is a worldwide agreement that many countries have signed on to called the Nagoya Protocol that kind of regulates and helps to create an agreement about how people are going to use these genetically diverse things. But there's definitely some additional ethical and legal questions, and I went a little bit over, sorry. That was it. Oh my goodness. All right, I saw Crystal first.
Please elaborate a little bit on who owns the genetic diversity. Like, why is that a problem, and who's debating it? And I feel like you kind of had to cut off your thought there. So,
And, Adam, you said the word biopiracy, so please use that.
Yes.
So there's this one main community in southern Mexico called Totontepec where this is like traditionally a variety of corn that's grown in these poor soils, and it can kind of self-fertilize. Researchers from the United States came in and said, hey, we want some of these seeds of this like special corn. We're going to take it back to Davis, Wisconsin, and try to grow it there and see what it's all about, and does it actually fix nitrogen, and can it do it in different environments, blah, blah, blah. Now there's a question about, okay, is that going to be commercialized? Is that going to become, like, is Monsanto going to be like selling that to farmers in Africa? Is that going to be, who's going to make money off of that? And then that question is like, is it a company that's making money off of that? Is it some sort of like non-profit thing? Is it the people that actually have been cultivating and maintaining the seed for this length of time? It's sort of a like, wow, this is really important and special, and it could help us feed the world, and there must be some money in that somewhere, but who's going to get it? This biopiracy question, these are all sort of like slightly different examples. This right here is it's a plant from, I believe, French Guiana, that some French scientists went to French Guiana and said, hey, like, what plants do you guys use to help cure or treat malaria? And they were told, like, oh, there's these different plants, and this was one of them. They took it back to France and kind of subjected it to a bunch of processes and came up with this new anti-malaria drug that's now being sold. And the people in the country are like, well, that's our traditional cultural knowledge that you're like profiting from, and we're not seeing a dime. Why is that? And the sort of French argument was, well, we did all these special chemical things to it, and we isolated these like bioavailable blah blah blah, so you guys don't do that, so like it's still our product. And then the indigenous argument is, yeah, but we're the ones who pointed out this plant to you. We have thousands of plants. This is the one that you chose. So that's kind of I think there's a colonial legacy of the rubber in Brazil is a great example, a colonial legacy of kind of going to a new place and saying, what are the plants that the native people here are using, taking that and commercializing it for the benefit of not the people who lived there originally. So that's kind of both of those questions. Sorry. Thanks, Zeta. Appreciate the vote of confidence. Yeah.
I hear that there's this idea of the sort of the strategic potato genetic reserve in South America, where every time we over monoculture a potato and kill it, then we go back into that well and pull out a new one. Similar situation with corn. Can you talk anything about that?
Yeah, I mean, I assume so. There's a bunch of different seed banks around the world that are saving like as wide a spectrum as possible of the genetic diversity of these different crops. I don't know specifically for corn, but this would certainly be one of the ones that we'd be like, yeah, we want to save that because it's pretty unique. So, yeah. Yeah.
So did the Europeans, before the 1500s or whatever it was that they took over the world, did they have any corn-like things at all? Was there any European?
No, there's
nothing
no,
like that at all.
Well, I mean, there's all of the grains that were domesticated by Europeans, like wheat, barley,
right?
You know, rye.
But corn was
corn
purely
is
a Mexican.
corn is American. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So how did you get to eat those that blue corn and the weird corns?
Dense corn.
Oh,
You have favorite corn?
Yes.
Picture.
Oh my gosh, you guys, this is the coolest thing. Okay, so this is I so want to grow this one. This is a corn called Oaxacan Green Dent. And it's just, I just think it's beautiful.
Is it tasty?
I have no idea. I've never eaten it. The varieties I've grown, I grew something similar to this guy, but not quite the
We call that
same.
Indian corn.
Right.
Yeah.
Probably
I've grown
racist.
this one. This is Dakota Black popcorn. And then this past year we grew a popcorn called Calico that actually ended up not really working out so great for us in terms of
Corn's hard to grow.
popcorn.
Yeah.
But these are actually my photos from my process of making tortillas from corn that we grew.
They're delicious.
Can you back
They're
up and
amazing.
tell us why you have such strong opinions on corn? Where did this come from?
I have a lot of strong opinions on food in general, I guess. I love growing edible plants. So like I gave a talk on tomatoes 2 or 3 years ago for Sin. And then I don't know, I'm always looking for like what's a new variety that I haven't grown before, or like what's a I have a favorite squash.
Which is?
It's called the pink banana squash. It's like huge and pink and like beautiful and tasty
I
and
want some of those seeds.
it's amazing.
We need to do
They're
some plant
available.
swapping.
They're at I've gotten them at what's it called over here? Summer Winds. Yeah. All
The
right.
corn in Mexico
Questions,
the corn in Mexico is totally different.
Yes. Yeah.
So the process that you've got on the screen right there is required for any corn with a waxy cuticle. Do you need to do that for sweet corn? Because I know we all just boil it and eat it straight up. But would we do better if we dipped in water?
That's a great question. I don't know. I mean, no offense to sweet corn, but I don't think nutrition is the primary reason.
Fair enough.
It's all about the butter.
It's all-
Yeah.
That's true.
But no, I don't know. I don't know if the mutant nature of it makes some of the nutrients more bioavailable or what. Not sure.
So theoretically, with all corns that are dry hard kernels, you should be boiling them in something alkali?
Well, I mean, popcorn you obviously can't, right? Because it wouldn't pop. So I mean, but yeah, now I actually don't know. Like a question I have is I don't know how these flour corns are typically. When you go buy cornmeal at the store, like I don't know if they're boiling it up into hominy first and then grinding it and doing some kind of weird dehydration thing. When you buy masa harina for making tortillas, that's actually this ground, dehydrated, ground and kind of like dehydrated into sort of a cake and then ground again. So it's actually, it starts out wet. And you can go to there's different taquerias and stuff that'll actually sell you the masa that's already made. Yeah.
So you said you
Right
can't,
across the street here.
you said you can't do this to popcorn, but it's worth telling the story. Last night we served up the last of our homegrown corn, but we discovered some of it was moldy, so we had to stretch it, and we stretched it with popcorn, and it made great tortillas. So you
Yeah.
can do this with popcorn and make your own tortillas.
Yeah. Just the popcorn you could get at Safeway, like the big
Wait, so can you rehydrate popcorn kernels with the proper alkali boiling?
They worked.
Well-
They ground up just like homegrown corn.
rehydrate how? Make turn
In
them
the sense of
worst creamed corn.
I mean, in the sense
Yeah,
that they
no,
go
that-
clunk when you throw them on the ground. So.
So after being boiled, you can just chew them.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean they're not as tender as a sweet corn, but they're yeah, you can chew them.
The corn flour that you use for cornbread is not treated with lye. It's just straight up ground dry corn.
Cool.
Which explains
Thanks
why
for
it's
letting
not
me
like
know.
we use it.
I see. Thank you, Ada. I appreciate that. Any final questions?
What's the
No.
niacin deficiency thing? That looked
Pellagra?
terrible, or the
It's called pellagra, and it causes skin issues, peripheral neuropathy, so like tingling and numbness, and then some neurological symptoms if it gets real severe. Yeah, but I mean it's fairly uncommon now, right? That we know about nutrients. Cool. Thanks, guys. That was-